You think you know what love is. You've felt it. Maybe you're feeling it right now. That pull toward someone. That warmth. That quiet, terrifying want to keep them close. It feels like the most natural thing in the world, like something that has always existed, something timeless, something universal. But here's what nobody tells you, the version of love you believe in, romantic, passionate, chosen freely, is one of the youngest ideas in all of human history. For most of the time your species has existed on this planet, love wasn't a feeling you followed. It was a system you were born into. And the real story of how love changed across the centuries and what it quietly did to your brain is far stranger than any love story you've ever been told. Let's go back, way back. 50,000 years ago, your ancestors didn't date. They didn't fall in love over a shared meal or lock eyes across a crowded room. They bonded because survival demanded it. Anthropologist Helen Fisher, who spent decades studying the neuroscience of attraction, identifies 3 distinct brain systems that evolved for mating: lust, attraction, and attachment. Each one runs on different chemistry. Each one served a different purpose. Lust got your ancestors reproducing. Attraction kept their attention on one partner long enough to rear offspring. Attachment made them stay. These weren't feelings chosen freely. They were biological circuits carved into the brain by millions of years of pressure. In early hunter-gatherer bands, pair bonding existed, but it looked nothing like modern romance. Partnerships were functional. A mate meant someone to share resources with, someone to watch your back, someone to help keep the children alive. The emotional intensity we now call being in love, the obsessive thinking, the euphoria, the heartbreak, those were side effects of a survival machine, not poetry, not destiny, chemistry. Then civilization happened, and love got complicated. In ancient Mesopotamia, around 4,000 years ago, marriage was a legal contract. Hammurabi's code regulated it like property law. A husband could divorce his wife by simply saying, "You are not my wife," 3 times. Women were transferred between families as economic and political assets. Love, the private, emotional kind, wasn't part of the transaction. It wasn't expected. It wasn't the point. If it happened quietly, on the side, and it had no power over the arrangement. Ancient Greece made things stranger. The Greeks had 6 different words for love, each one describing a completely different experience. Eros, passionate, physical desire. Philia, the deep friendship between equals. Storge, the love of family. Ludus, playful, flirtatious affection. Pragma, the long, patient love that builds over decades. And agape, a selfless love for all of humanity. To the Greeks, collapsing all of these into a single word would have been absurd, like calling hunger, thirst, and exhaustion the same sensation just because they all come from the body. But here is something your history teacher probably never told you. The ancient Greeks didn't think romantic love, eros, was a good thing. They feared it. Plato described it as a kind of madness. The poet Sappho wrote about love as something that shook her, broke her, unmade her. The Greeks saw eros not as a gift, but as a wound, a temporary insanity sent by the gods to destabilize rational people. They weren't entirely wrong. Neuroscientist Stephanie Ortigue and her team at Syracuse University found that falling in love activates 12 different areas of the brain simultaneously. It floods the body with dopamine, oxytocin, adrenaline, and vasopressin all at once. The prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for judgment and rational thought, partially shuts down. The Greeks didn't have brain scanners, but they noticed. When you're in love, you lose yourself. That wasn't metaphor. That was neuroscience. 2,000 years before neuroscience had a name, medieval Europe tried to fix this. The Catholic Church stepped in and restructured love entirely. Marriage became a sacrament, sacred, permanent, overseen by God. It was no longer a contract between families. It was a covenant between souls. But the church also decided that passion, physical desire, emotional intensity was a form of weakness. You were supposed to love your spouse with calm, dutiful Christian devotion, not with hunger, not with obsession. A 12th century monk named Andreas Capellanus actually wrote a guidebook on courtly love, a code of romantic behavior practiced among the aristocracy, in which the ideal love was always unrequited, always longing, never consummated. Love in medieval Christian Europe was most pure when it was denied. Then something shifted. In the 18th century, a new idea began spreading across the Western world, one so radical it quietly rewired how entire societies organized themselves. It was called the Enlightenment. Philosophers began arguing that individuals had the right to reason for themselves, to choose, to feel. And with that came a new and dangerous question. If you have the right to choose your religion and your government, why shouldn't you choose your spouse? Historian Stephanie Kuntz, in her landmark work, The Way We Never Were, argues that the idea of marrying for love, freely based purely on emotional connection, is only about 250 years old. Before that, across virtually every culture on Earth, marriage was too important to be left to something as unstable as feelings. But the idea spread. It spread through novels, through literature, through Jane Austen and Goethe and the Romantics, who turned emotional intensity into an art form, a virtue, a goal. By the 19th century, love-based marriage had become the cultural ideal in much of the Western world. By the 20th century, it had spread almost everywhere else. And here you are, right now, living inside the end product of all of that history. Your brain still runs Helen Fisher's 3 ancient circuits: lust, attraction, attachment, the same ones your ancestors used 50,000 years ago. But your expectations, those were written by medieval troubadours and Enlightenment philosophers and 19th century novelists who decided that passion was the highest form of human connection. No wonder love feels like madness sometimes, because it is madness. Glorious, ancient, chemically engineered madness, wrapped in 250 years of poetry and expectation. The Greeks called it a wound sent by the gods. And after everything you've just learned, after all of this history, all of this science, all of these centuries of humans trying to understand what they feel when they feel it, you have to admit something. Maybe they had a point.